There's no doubt that the Ignis Wraith is an iconic weapon in Warframe, but iconic will only get you so far. Does it still pack a punch in 2024? Is it still worth using? And how exactly does it stack up versus the brand new content introduced with Whispers in the Wall? Today we answer all of those questions. Hey guys, welcome back. As always, my name is Leyzar, and today we're going to be re-diving deeper into the Ignis Wraith. As per the usual, I'm going to explain everything that you need to know about the weapon, go into a new player-friendly build before jumping into the endgame steel path setup. That said though, please bear in mind that my builds and guides usually take a more new player-friendly tone, simply because I want anybody watching to understand how the weapon functions and how it should be built. So, in case you're a vet and you already know most of the stuff, you can either skip ahead or have a bit of patience. And with that out of the way, let's jump into the Ignis Wraith. Let's begin by checking out how the weapon handles without any mods equipped, and for that, just a couple of our usual free shots. The Ignis Wraith is a beam weapon with a limited range of 27 plus 3 meters. Now, what exactly do I mean by 27 plus 3? For the first 27 meters, you get yourself infinite body punch through, which is absolutely phenomenal. Keep in mind that you are not going to be able to go through walls. For that, you will have to build punch through. For the final 3 meters, however, the Ignis Wraith creates a 3-meter radius sphere that essentially burns everything within its path, so you can aim something like this. When it comes to the headshot multiplier, this one was a little bit funky in the sense that you're not getting any headshot multiplier if you lower the beam part of the weapon on top of your targets. Allow me to show you what I mean. So if I go like this and just lower the boom on headshot, you're not getting headshot multiplier. But if you're firing directly at a head like so, you saw that number there, 85, you are going to be getting yourself that headshot multiplier. So yes, the Ignis Wraith, by all intents and purposes, does have a headshot multi, but it depends how you fire at your enemy. Simply aim directly at the head, make sure that that 3-meter sphere makes contact with the head part of the enemy, or the weak point, because as you know, some enemies have weak points in different parts, and we'll get to that just a tad later. Usability is absolutely fantastic on this one. You got fantastic range. It's a beam weapon, so you're gonna get yourself 2 damage ticks per ammo. It's easy to use. It's basically no recoil. As for ammunition, magazine is absolutely humongous at 200, but the reserve, sadly, only another 200. It used to be bigger, that's what she said, but the saw to that one. So let's jump into stats to see exactly what we're dealing with. Mod capacity is gonna be 60 out of 60, but let's say you just built your Ignis Wraith, you just got it, right? It comes with 30 out of 30. You jump into actions and you plug in that auto king catalyst, you double your mod capacity. Is it worth it? Yes, absolutely. Once upon a time, the Ignis Wraith and the Amprex were the top tier weapons in Warframe. This was back in 2018-19. Nowadays, incarnate weapons are the most powerful. And if you want to see a top 10 of the most powerful weapons in the game right now, link the cards right now. The point is, the Ignis Wraith, for its low mastery rank lockout, it's still an amazing weapon, and it's something that you need to experience. At the end of the day, we don't have a whole lot of flamethrowers in Warframe. Go for the Ignis Wraith. Here's a bit of a curiosity, however. Did you know that the normal Ignis doesn't have a headshot multiplier, but the Wraith does? Yeah, I don't know why that is, but it is what it is. When it comes to forma, mine has been format a total of 9 times. You do not need to do this. I only do this because issues and tests, not important. For the weapon build, I'm recommending you can start with something like 2 to 3 format, depending on the mods that you have available, and we'll go more in depth into that one just a tad later. Excellent slot. If you're a newer player coming to the game, you can leave this one alone because, again, by default, you're looking at 30 meters worth of range. But if you're not new to the game and you do have the resources, go for Sinister Reach. That's another 12 beam length, 12 meters, going to 42. Mwah. Beautiful, fantastic. And of course, the empty arcane slot should be unlocked as well when you have the necessary resources, because you can add a whole lot of power onto basically any weapon by using those arcanes. Let's talk about stats. Accuracy, we don't care. It's a bloody flamethrower. Ammo maximum is not fantastic at all. Ammo pickup at 40. Going back to the ammo for just a second, you see the problem with that maximum ammo is the fact that you can't play around with fire rate as hard as you used to, because you will be running into some ammo issues. This is not a problem for normal mode, but for steel path mode, where you can't spam a whole lot of ammo pads, this can be an issue, so careful how hard you go on fire rate. Speaking about fire rate, the default rate is 8, which is not bad. Magazine of 200, noise alarming because, you know, flamethrower. Reload on 1.7 seconds, which is pretty good considering the magazine size. Riven disposition of nothing, because this is quite the popular weapon. You can still get rivens which are worth it. For example, you can get something like this. You get flat damage and critical chance. It's not a fantastic riven, and not a harmless negative considering the ammunition issues. If you manage to get something which is worthwhile, definitely go for it. However, I would not recommend you go spend thousands upon thousands of plat just to get a worthwhile ribbon, because the weapon doesn't really need it, and the difference in performance because of that low ribbon disposition is simply not worth it. Trigger held, basically it's easy as cake to use. As for the damage, you're looking at 17% base critical chance, which is on the edge of worth it. Yes, it is still worth building crit and hunter munitions. The critical multiplier is awfully high as a base 2.5x, status chance 29%, and default heat damage, which incidentally is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, single elemental in Warframe right now. Let's talk about a introductory level setup for more newer Tenno. Damage installation, multi-shot with split chamber, critical chance and critical damage through the use of vital sense, as well as critical delay. Now you can swap this one out if you don't enjoy the negative fire rate, which is not a big deal, that minus 20%, but you can go with point strike. Do you want to sacrifice 50% critical chance for 20% fire rate? In my opinion, it is worth it. It comes down to the user. Keep in mind that with lower critical chance will also mean less slash procs from hunter munitions. This is not slash damage on the target, this is bleed damage. If you still don't fully understand how hunter munition functions and what are all the modifiers at play, link in the cards right now for a full and detailed guide. I know it may seem trivial, but trust me, there are a lot of subtleties to Warframe, so bear that one in mind. More fire rate with vital acceleration, so I don't care anymore about that critical delay. However, this is your option slot. Instead of this one, you can also go with vigilante armaments. You can also add another elemental to the mix. It's entirely up to you. And again, in the Excel slot, I would praise Sinister Reach. We're going to be testing against Corrupted Heavy Goons level 80. In my opinion, a mastery rank, I don't know, let's say something like 10, 12, something like that, shouldn't see more than level 80 Corrupted Heavy Goons, which are some pretty tough targets. 7 of these. Let's spawn some bombards as well, some corrupted bombards. Bombards are gonna be more susceptible to radiation damage, as you can see right here, than they are to corrosive, like the corrupted heavy goons. We can also spawn some lancers, but lancers are very easy to kill, which is normally why I don't really spawn them all that often. Level 80s, normal. Let's see what the weapon can do against these targets. Go for head, as per usual, and as you can see, the weapon has no issue whatsoever in absolutely annihilating and melting down everything that stands before you in AoE fashion, with basically no effort whatsoever from the user, because, you know, this is pretty easy to do. As you can see, the Ignis Wraith is still a fantastic weapon, especially if you're a newer Tenno coming into the game. This is the type of weapon that everybody should get to experience in Warframe, because it is highly satisfying. This concludes the new player portion of the guide. Keep in mind that you should adapt your build depending on what kind of activity you're going for. While corrosive may be fantastic against something like corrupted heavy goons, and radiation may be great versus bombards, there are other factions out there as the corpus, and you can use gas builds, or you can even use magnetic builds, and so on and so forth. You can even fight the infested, which are not really hard to kill, but there's a lot of them, so you should prioritize area of effect weapons such as the Ignis Wraith, especially with a heat build. Now let's assume that you're not a new player coming to the game and you already have all of the mods, all of the everything. You're gonna be looking for something like this. We're gonna swap out split chamber for galvanized chamber, and we're also gonna be introducing galvanized aptitude. Yes, galvanized aptitude will be lending its damage benefit to the Ignis Wraith. Outside of that, you will see that the build is a little bit on the funky side. Hold on a second, what's that elemental combination there? You got corrosive and radiation. How in the actual, and heat as well? How does that work? This is a brand new mod that was introduced with Whispers in the Wall, and you will see that this build is catered towards the brand new content. I'm talking about Whispers in the Wall content. Remember what I said about a second ago, that you should cater the build depending on what kind of content you're doing? This is exactly what we're doing right now. In Whispers in the Wall content, we're going to be fighting the Murmur, and the Murmur is weak to corrosive and radiation depending on the target. And with these brand new mods, these radiation mods, building corrosive and radiation on the same weapon becomes quite comfortable, which is what we're doing today. You might go for the 90 mods instead of the 60 mods, though keep in mind we do have heat on the weapon, and I want to build those heat procs on my target as quickly as possible, so going for the 60s purely for the status chance will be more advantageous. You also got to keep in mind the elemental weighting if you go for the 90s, so you're dropping status chance and you're also increasing the elemental weight of corrosive, which is not overly ideal because you just need 10 procs. We don't have vital on the weapon, but we're gonna use something else to take care of that. Primary frostbite, but how are you even gonna proc it? I'm glad you asked. We're gonna be using the best primer in the game right now, and that one is the Diriga. I'm gonna give you a base build for it, which is super cheap to build. Use something like this as a base build for your Diriga. As for the weapon, you have a couple of options. We're gonna be using the Frost setting. So basically, what the Diriga will do, proc a whole bunch of statuses on my target: impact, cold, radiation, and puncture. Keep in mind that this is the contact damage between the projectile making contact with a target, and this is gonna be the radial attack. It's a Hellstrom build. Yes, Hellstrom is the best weapon you can use as a primer for your little companion, so bear that one in mind. The rest of the build should be pretty self-explained. You got yourself explosion radius, you got yourself fire rate, and you got yourself multi-shot. Those are the things that you should prioritize. Oh, and terminal velocity as well, essentially projectile flight speed, so it makes a more comfortable primer. Outside of that, there's one more thing which I do want to do: access some of those fantastic Warframe buffs as well through Corrosive Projection, Arcane Avenger, and Arcane Acceleration. When you have a big magazine on anything, a surefire way to increase your DPS is basically go for that fire rate. Just make sure you don't overdo it, because then you're going to be running yourself into ammo issues. And if you are going to overdo it, however, make sure you have a way to get that ammo back consistently, which is not spamming of pads, because again, we're talking about a theoretical steel path build. We're going to spawn some of the brand new enemies. We're talking about the Murmur. We're going to go with the Kulverin, 10 of these, and we're also going to be spawning a target which is extremely beefy in terms of EHP. Look at this, 15,000. Vulnerable to radiation, 10 of the Hollow Vein, 180, and we're also going to be enabling the steel path modifiers, and we're going to be unpausing the AI so they can hit me and they can go through their motions, their mechanics, and so on and so forth, because you see, these targets have a couple of secrets that you should know about. We're going to activate Revenant's 4, that is Nourish. I replaced Dance Macabre with Nourish. I'm going to be getting myself some Vital on my targets, and of course the energy back as well. As you will see, I have no problem whatsoever in taking out the Necromex. Essentially, I am melting down my targets with great ease. However, when it comes to these Murmur enemies, they are a little bit tricky because they have two types of attacks. They have their range attack and a melee attack. In their melee attack, they're channeling just like this. You see the stuff they're channeling right now? And they get a lot. And I mean a lot of damage mitigation. Basically, I wouldn't even hit them unless you have an incarnate weapon. At that point, I would just wait for them to finish their cast, or just simply get away like this at range and wait for them to attack me, because the second attack is called their range laser beam of death, something like that. If that touches you, it disables your active abilities. However, while they're channeling that or attacking you at range, they're not getting that insane damage mitigation, and you can simply melt them down with ease like so. So keep in mind, there's a very big difference on when you hit those Vile Veins. They have a lot of HP and a lot of damage mitigation. Make sure you don't touch them, or if you do attack them while they're in their melee stance, be aware of that huge damage mitigation. One last thing I want to point out, the weak points for the brand new Necromex is on the shoulder pads, and we're just gonna renounce the Hollowed Vein and pause the AI so you can see exactly what I mean. You see, these guys don't have a legit headshot multiplier. Yes, you can shoot them in the head because they don't have any. What they do have are these canisters on the side. Take one of them out, the arm blows out. Take the second one out, the other arm blows out, and now the Necromech goes in self-destruct mode, and after a couple of ticks, it's gonna explode, dealing damage to enemies around it, which is fantastic. Yes, because look, like this one took this guy's arm off, and I'm gonna shoot this one, and once again it goes into that self-destruct mode, boom, explosion. Great, fantastic. But the problem is, if the enemies dies under such an effect, you're not gonna proc any of your kill arcanes, including the ones you have on your weapon. So when you decide to kill your targets, I would just do one of the weak points and then just normally kill them. Keep in mind that if you're using weapons that have infinite body punch through, such as this one, or the Tenentarka Plasmor, let's say, you're more prone to blowing up targets through that special mechanic. So bear that one in mind. Welcome to Deimos, my friends. Now we're gonna fight the Murmur, the Necromex, and the actual Murmur themselves. Because yes, the Necromex count as Murmur. It's a bit weird, but that's how the likes to do things. So there you go. Essentially, my focus here is to show you what the Ignis Wraith can do versus these enemies. Obviously, remember the rogue Pulervins we were talking about earlier, no problem whatsoever taking them out. Normally, those veins don't really show up all that often as normal quote-unquote enemies, but it should be noted that the weapon can actually tear through them like a hot knife through butter. Oh, and by the way, this enemy right here doesn't have a weak point per se. Yeah, so essentially, you just shoot it till it dies. Doesn't have a headshot per se. The Necromex are weak to corrosive, as in rogue Pulervins such as these. As for the Murmur themselves, like these abominations here, those are weak to radiation. It's not the only elements they're weak to, however, those are the 75% or 3 pluses. That's why essentially, ideally, you want to go for Radiation and Corrosive when fighting these guys. Honestly, I am quite pleased with the performance of the weapon. This is the Ignis Wraith. This is a mastery rank, what, 8, 7 weapon? Something like that. I don't even remember at this point. And it can tear house through the brand new content. This is still Steel Path, still the latest and greatest, and the Ignis Wraith is still holding its own without much issue whatsoever. So it's still, even in 2024, I feel a fantastic weapon, especially if you're just coming into the game right now and you prefer things a bit more straightforward, a bit more easy to use while you come to grips with Warframe and move into incarnate weapons. And that was Ballas. There's really not a whole lot extra to say about the Ignis Wraith. It's still a fantastic weapon. Is it one of the best in the game? No, it's one of the most popular in the game, but in terms of power, it falls flat of its incarnate brethren. And at the end of the day, it's normal to be that way. Incarnate weapons are simply on their own special level. That does not mean you cannot go through the entirety of the game with the Ignis Wraith. Still quite the popular weapon, still easy to use, still melts even Steel Path level enemies without any issue whatsoever, and you should definitely have it in your arsenal. As always, my name has been Leyzar. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like the channel, subscribe only if you enjoy the content. If you got any feedback from me, I would love to read it in the comment section down below. Also in the comment section down below, if you want to suggest any particular type of content, like, hey, I would like to see this weapon build or that weapon build, and so on and so forth. If you're interested in even more Whispers in the Wall content, I got your back. Look at the cards right now. I'll catch you guys in the next one.